Welcome to Season 4 of Lawyers with Game. Today we're going to be talking about the kickoff of the NFL season and daily fantasy sports with Jason Barclay from PrizePicks. Stay tuned. Hi everyone and welcome to Lawyers with Game. I'm your host, Darius Gambino. I'm first and foremost a lifelong gamer. I've played on just about every console from the original Atari to the Sega Dreamcast to now the PlayStation 5. I'm also an intellectual property attorney with over 20 years of experience advising clients on issues related to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. I'm with the law firm of Saul, Ewing in Philadelphia, and you can find me on the PlayStation Network under gamertag EaglesFan71. I'm really excited to have us join on the show today, Jason Barclay. He is Chief Legal Counsel and Head of Public Policy at PrizePicks. Jason, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Darius.
Absolutely. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe so we can continue making them. And keep in mind that this series is intended to be a general and very casual discussion of legal issues. It is not intended as actual legal advice. If you need actual legal advice, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you. Now, Jason, we're going to talk a lot about daily fantasy sports today, sometimes called DFS. PrizePicks has been a huge innovator in that space, and I definitely want to get into all that. But first, I wanted to ask you about your path to your current role. You became the first chief legal officer at PrizePicks in 2023. Before that, you were chief legal counsel to the governors of Illinois and Indiana. So how did you start your legal career and how did you wind up at PrizePicks?
Well, Darius, I'm a UVA law alum. I noticed that Michael McCann may have been one of your first guests.
He was.
So it's appropriate that he was the first and I'm the last because we were in the same law school class, and I think our class rank was similar to that as well. But when I got out of UVA law school, I was determined to be a federal prosecutor. And here we are 20 plus years later, and I've never spent a day prosecuting any case in my life. So the story really starts my second summer of law school when I went to Barnes and Thornburg, a big law firm in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I started working with a guy named Larry Mackey. And Larry was the prosecutor in the Oklahoma City bombing cases. And he quickly became my mentor in life, in the practice of law. And we spent about 10 years together building a law practice and trying some really interesting cases together. But I got invited on what I believe were a couple of sabbaticals into government. The first one you mentioned was with a guy named Mitch Daniels, who was running for governor of Indiana at the time. And the second was with a guy named Bruce Rauner, who became the governor of Illinois. And in both of those cases, I became legal counsel to those governors. But I also inherited a portfolio of different agencies and issues, including all of the gaming issues in those states. So that's was something I was drafted into, didn't have much of a background in it, but I quickly became an expert. And when I left government, I got put on the horse racing commissions in both states. I became the first chairman of the Indiana Athletic Commission. And I also served on the executive committee of the nonprofit, the Indiana Sports Corporation, which you might know as hosting multiple Final Fours, Super Bowls, the football national championship. So I had a background in sports. I had a background in law. And I also spent a tenure as the general counsel of a physical therapy company called Athletico that has deep roots in athletic training and sports as well. So that was my background when I took the PrizePicks job. And frankly, my litigation experiences come in pretty handy as well.
Yeah, I bet. And just to bring that full circle, I had a trial last year in South Bend before Judge Lichty, who I'm sure you may have come across in your time at Barnes and Thornburg. So that was a very interesting trial.
Yeah, one of my former law partners. Yeah, David's a good guy.
Yeah, he was. He was a great judge. So let's get into DFS a little bit. For those of our listeners who really don't understand what daily fantasy sports is, I'll give you an example based on my favorite team, the Philadelphia Eagles. It would be, for instance, to a contest to determine if, let's say, Devontae Smith, wide receiver for the Eagles, is going to have over or under a particular number of yards in a game. And so these are the types of offerings that PrizePicks has. Can you talk a little bit, Jason, about daily fantasy sports and the types of offerings that PrizePicks has in the NFL and in other areas?
Well, really, the fantasy sports, as you know, started a long time ago in the 1980s. There's some great stories about how fantasy sports started. In 2006, Congress, when it legislated around federal betting and wagering, it created a safe harbor for fantasy sports. And that's really where the roots of daily fantasy sports come from, is the specific definition of what constitutes a fantasy sport that's built into federal law. So companies similar to PrizePicks started building these prediction style daily fantasy games as early as 2012. Side Prize, which is PrizePicks' parent company, was first started in 2014. And then the first prediction style daily fantasy sports contests, similar to what PrizePicks offers, were first offered in 2018. So we were licensed by states like Arkansas and Indiana, Virginia, all who were front runners in legalizing and regulating daily fantasy sports. And you're exactly right. These are contests and games where you make predictions around the performance of players on your roster. It's intended to be fast. It's intended to be something that is exciting for the player. And it's also intended to be something that, unlike season-long fantasy sports, can be played on a daily basis for various prizes.
Right. And if I'm correct, the law draws a distinction between season fantasy sports and daily fantasy sports, right?
Yeah, the definitions are pretty broad, and that's actually one of the themes I think you'll hear from us, which is a lot of those laws were built around the concept of fantasy sports broadly. But as innovation has occurred, as companies like PrizePicks have come in and created new contests and new games, those laws need to be updated. Regulations around those laws are being updated. And so you're seeing this trend certainly in regulatory circles where laws are being specifically written to accommodate for daily fantasy sports as opposed to those season-long games.
Right. And one area I think where the laws maybe haven't caught up in all states yet is daily fantasy sports when it comes to esports, right? So again, if a lot of people may not understand, there are esports competitions out there. In the case of one of the biggest esports franchises, League of Legends, you have 5-on-5 tournaments of multiple rounds. And one of the things that PrizePicks has contests for is how many kills a particular League of Legends player will have on a particular map or series of maps. Can you talk a little bit about PrizePicks esports offerings and what's coming down the pike in terms of esports daily fantasy?
Well, we're the largest daily fantasy sports operator that offers esports. And as you said, Darius, this is really an emerging area, both for the industry and for us. We found something really interesting when we did some statistical analysis around our players. We now have over 10 million members in the PrizePicks community. We're growing rapidly, and 80% of those members identify themselves as gamers. But when we looked at how many of them were actually playing or picking esports lineups and making esports predictions on our platform, that was only about 20% of our members. So why the discrepancy between the 80% that consider themselves gamers and the 20% that were actually playing esports contests? And what we found was that it was somewhat unapproachable. Folks didn't understand what professional esports were. And so this past year, for instance, we launched something called the Esports Lab, which is intended to be a beta in the beta version currently, but something that we hope becomes a permanent fixture at PrizePicks. We call it the ESPN of esports because it's intended to be the central repository for things like statistics on all professional esports, someplace you can go to learn about these sports and how they relate to the contests that PrizePicks offers. And you can actually live stream these contests straight from our website, straight from the Esports Lab. And in fact, if you were to go there today, Darius, there is an article on the front page that tries to compare traditional sports with esports. So if you're playing basketball, for instance, on the PrizePicks website today, you'll be thinking about how many points LeBron James may score on any given night. So the article describes that and tries to translate that into esports terms. So you might be looking at Counter-Strike and how many kills Simple may have on any given night.
Right.
And so we're trying to translate traditional sports for our casual players into esports so that they're more familiar, they're more comfortable playing esports. And as a result of all of that, all of our efforts, led by our great leader, Adam Boothie, we've been able to increase the play around esports contests to, it's now the fourth most popular sport being played on PrizePicks, behind basketball, football, and baseball. So pretty remarkable success in this area for our company.
That's amazing. And you mentioned Adam. He's a great guy. He's very knowledgeable about esports. He's been in the field for a long time. He certainly knows what he's doing. But yeah, I think educating people, because that stat you mentioned, I think, you say 80% of your customer base are gamers. I think 70 or 80% of the population at large are gamers. But do they understand enough about certain games, specifically the ones that are major esports titles like League of Legends and Counter-Strike, and Call of Duty and others? Do they understand enough about those to really go out and compete in a contest to understand what the odds are? So I think that's a fantastic offering.
Well, check out the Esports Lab. I think it's
okay.
It's one of the true innovations in this area, and it's really trying to connect exactly what you said, educate folks on what esports is, but connect it to the world of fantasy sports. So I agree with you. Most folks consider themselves gamers. Most of those gamers are also playing fantasy sports. Here's the first time where we're trying to draw that intersection directly, so that folks can enjoy esports at the same time that they're playing fantasy contests and fantasy games.
Absolutely. Well, I want to transition to ask you, this is Lawyers with Games, so we like to talk about video games here. I wanted to ask you, what are some of your favorite video games of all time? And if there's anything that you're playing right now, whether it be on a console, on your phone, on your PC, and any current favorites.
Well, growing up, I was a Nintendo guy, and I think I finished, I spent so much time on it. I finished Contra, Zelda, Mike Tyson, Tecmo Bowl. I mean, I think I played those so much that my joysticks were worn out. The games were fried by the time I was done. And what's been a real joy and pleasure for me is I've now have a 15-year-old son, and he is a gamer and spends a lot of time on his Xbox. And so I get to play with him. And so the same themes, we spend a lot of time on Madden. We're having a lot of fun with college football 25 right now. In fact, I'm a Duke alumnus, so the only way I can ever see them win a national championship is by trying to win one on that game. So we spend a lot of time trying to see if we can help Duke win a national championship.
Yeah, bringing it back to that, I mean, that was a real phenomenon this year. The fact that, that was one of the things we talked about with Michael McCann almost 4 years ago, was the Supreme Court decision that paved the way for NIL and eventually NCAA football, or college football 25, to come back almost 11 years after the last title came out. And it really is, it's a fun game. I've been having a lot of fun playing it as well. I went to Villanova, so we don't have a we don't have a college football team that would make the grade there.
You understand, yeah, you get it.
I understand, and I hope that college basketball comes back in the same way at some point or another, because I think that's just as exciting.
Agreed.
So, last question for you: what are some exciting things that are on the horizon for PrizePicks through the end of this year and into 2025?
Well, I hope you caught the news just within the last couple of weeks that we've announced the hiring of a new CEO, a guy named Mike Ibarra, who your listeners probably know was the former president of Blizzard Entertainment.
Yeah.
So as we talk about this intersection between fantasy sports and video games and esports, Mike is a tremendous hire for us and will set the tone for the industry, that we intend to continue to innovate and develop new games and contests in the fantasy sports area, in the areas of games of skill, And hopefully we can continue to develop a stronger relationship with our esports partners and all of the innovation that's going on there. So, we are most excited about that. But we're also on, the verge of the NFL season. And while folks are doing their season-long NFL drafts, we are busy getting ready to deploy new games and contests. We introduced a couple of new features this year. Demons and Goblins is intended to be a way to enhance that game of skill element of our contests. You can increase your prizes based upon the quality of your picks, based upon the difficulty of your picks. And so I think you're going to see some new ideas and some new creativity from our product team there. And then within the last year, we've introduced a new player versus player leaderboard style game called Arena. That's not quite available in Pennsylvania yet, but is available in 11 states across the country, where you can play against other competitors, other contestants in a leaderboard style contest. And that's been having tremendous success across the country. This will be the first full NFL season where that game is being offered. So a lot of exciting things going on at PrizePicks, and explains why we are continuing to grow and expand, and we're incredibly excited about the future of the business.
Yeah, you mentioned my home state of Pennsylvania. We still don't have a full offering here in terms of daily fantasy sports, but I am keeping an eye on it, and I'm excited about all those things you just mentioned. So,
well, as we said, Pennsylvania is a great example of a state that has some older fantasy sports laws. We are working regularly with your regulators, your legislators, policymakers, and others to continue to expand those laws, allow for new innovation, new game types, new contests. And they are big supporters, by the way, of fantasy sports and of PrizePicks. And so I'm hopeful that you'll see a version of us in your home state here very soon.
I hope so. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Jason Barclay from PrizePicks for coming on. If you have any questions about any of the legal issues we raised today, please drop them into the comments. We'll do our best to answer them without providing any real legal advice, of course. I'm Darius Gambino, and until next time, this has been Lawyers with Game.